We're in mid-March and the temperature is gradually becoming more and more mild with each passing day. It might not seem it at times this March, but it generally is getting milder. And it's time that I brought somebody back in from the cold. Of course, what I'm referring to are a number of ant colonies, young ant colonies consisting of a single queen and varying amounts of broods, and in some cases workers. And they've been in the shed over the winter. They've survived the cold, but there are 2 colonies where the news isn't so good, and I've lost those 2 particular young colonies. But at the moment here I have 5 colonies that are doing potentially very well. But I'm pleased that these have come through. I did give them a feed about a fortnight ago, some special sort of jelly feed that you can get for ants in these little jelly pots, and I just put a little bit in each test tube on a piece of silver foil. That way I can keep the food off the test tube that the ants are living in and to cut down mould, and they all fed. I was worried that I was beginning to leave it a little bit too late before bringing these out, but we seem to have been all right, and the ants have indeed eaten, and it is now at the time where I need to get them set up and put into an outworld and set up for the next stage of colony foundation and keeping, so to speak. But this is all new to me. I never kept ants in this type of setup, in the 1980s. It was all very different. But we're doing well. I'm very pleased with these. But of course, the one ant that hasn't done well, apart from the one last year's Niagara Queen, I did lose the harvester ants, the small colony, the Messer barbarus, which looked to be a fantastic species. In fact, I've just ordered another queen and brood. They're very, very cheap at the moment. In fact, they're far cheaper than the postage. And so I'm hoping to replace the harvester ant that are lost. And I don't know why, when I came to check on them, I think it would be early February, I noticed that all were out of the test tube. They did have an outworld, and the 4 workers that had gotten the queen were all out in that outworld, and they were all unfortunately dead. I can only presume that maybe for that particular species the period that had given them for hibernation was maybe too long. Maybe they were kept too dry, or maybe the temperatures during the winter were so mild that they became active and went looking for food. They did have food available, it was just a bit of water that they didn't have. And anyway, they've succumbed, but lesson learnt for the future. It's very much a case of trial and error. There's so much information out there, lots of really good YouTube videos and online information, but in the end it's very much trial and error. And now for the ant that most people want to see, and that is this lady, this extremely large Camponotus ligniperda, or a giant carpenter ant, of which there are many. This is not a UK species, but this is a dream species for me. It's a dream I've had before from a collected female in Switzerland. It ultimately failed, but I remember seeing these or finding a nest of these at the base of a pine tree in Interlaken. I was mesmerised by the size. When you compare these to the size of Lassie's Niger Queens, these are literally twice the size, and this one is around about 30 mil, certainly 25 to 30 mil from front of the head to the end of the abdomen. And as you can see, her abdomen is now swollen because she obviously fed when I fed them a couple of weeks ago. She has a small brood. She may have lost one of the brood. She had either some very young larvae or one sort of medium-sized larva. She's never produced anything. Hopefully now that she's inside and she can settle down when I get her in the darkness, she will start to lay again. But she's certainly done really well. These are impressive ants, and they make what's called carter nests in dry timber, usually in pine. Well, that's based on my own experience from the nests that I found in Switzerland. But I would love to have a colony of these going. Very, very impressive ants. Now there's one other colony that I haven't showed you yet, and these, I must admit, I didn't think I would get through the winter, and I did lose 2 workers before they went into hibernation. This is their outworld, and this is a large red ant species called Manica rubida, and these have surprised me. They've done very well. I didn't think they would get through. They are meant to be hard to keep. 2 workers left of the 4, and a large female, a large queen. And the queen is as long as a Lassie's Niger Queen, and that's large for a red ant. This again is another European species. It doesn't occur in the UK, but it's a large, impressive species. Although the workers, at least these workers, are pretty much the same size as Myrmica ruginodis, which we do have here and which is common. But nice that this ant has survived. I'm very pleased that it has. And these have an outworld that is just a plastic container in which some very nice chocolates came in, wrapped in gold foil. And as you can see, the interesting thing that these love to dig, the workers. There were only 4 workers, but they were constantly digging. And this gravel is about 2 millimeters in diameter, so it's a decent sized gravel. It's certainly a hefty chunk. And these actually sealed themselves in. They built the gravel up around the entrance to the tube, which you can see there, and completely enclosed themselves in, just as a colony would do in the winter. And so these will now become active and will start exploring their outworld and looking for food. So one of my first jobs will be to put in a couple of small shallow pots from which they can gain water and a source of food. Well, there are 2 of the Lassie's Niger colonies that I can set up in their next outworld. Very easy setup in which to keep ants. Simple plastic tub. You don't have to use a substrate, but I like it for aesthetic effects if nothing else. But a layer of substrate. It doesn't have to be deep. Create a bit of a ridge at the front. Take the colony to be put in. Can now remove the cotton wool from one end. And I will put a couple of tubs, a couple of small containers, one to hold water and one to hold the food supply, and then its lid on top. And that's the simple method that I'll be using. I will put some ventilation holes in, just very tiny pinhole sized ventilation holes at either end or in the top of the container, so there's a flow of air through the container. Many people don't have lids on the containers, and this is something that I'll look at, and they put a substance around here on which the ants won't pass, and so you can keep the lid off and the ants won't come out. And that's something for me to think of at a later date. But for now, that will suffice, but I will probably cover the test tube up just to give them a bit of darkness and make them feel secure, because now, as they would in the wild, the young ants that a queen has, there comes a time in the following spring, following the nuptial flight, where those ants or those workers have to start and go out and forage for the good of the queen and the colony. And that's what we're basically replicating here, where the workers have free access to and from the developing and growing nest. And that's all there is to it. We'll see how these go. I dare say there will be modifications. I've got another few of these to sort out, and we're away in the next stage of these colonies' lives. Well, they're back in from the cold, and over the next few weeks, hopefully, they'll settle down in their new outworlds, and hunting and foraging will take place, and the queens will start laying and producing additional brood, and hopefully all the colonies will continue to grow and do well. Very much a learning curve for me, and if you're keeping ants yourselves and keeping them in this method, it's a very interesting thing to do. Ants are wonderful, fabulous insects, great to sit and watch. Watching them in the nest is very akin really to watching fish in a fish tank. Very soothing and relaxing to watch as the ants go about their daily business. Obviously, the more ants a colony contains, the more impressive it is, and there's more to see, but it's still a joy to see these young colonies developing now that they've come through the first winter.